Hello, my name is Auren, and we're here for Tech Translated, a podcast where we're doing a lot of weird transitions, but we're here to help with all sorts of tech questions, whether it be something complicated that you face on your day-to-day or something that you just want to have described better. Feel free to leave a comment. We'll see it on YouTube and or Facebook live.
Right, and I am Jay from CompuMatter, and I'm the owner. This store has been here for 20 years, and I have been doing these technology-related things for many decades, 4 decades or more. And I've had for those who don't know, I've had a previous life. She hasn't had quite as many previous lives, but she's probably had a few, just smaller. A previous life in the automobile business for 13 years, and a previous life as a mortgage broker for many years. Have created some mortgage software along the way for that industry, and anyway, somewhere along the way, technology was always woven through that process, and I've stayed with it. Opened up a computer store, and here we are.
I didn't know about the automobile.
Yeah, I was a car salesman.
Huh.
I was a used car manager, finance manager. I used to go to auctions to buy and sell cars, and breathe in copious quantities of carbon monoxide, and while the auctioneer was up there spinning his wheels,
That's always impressive.
Yeah. It reminds me of a funny story. We have time for one?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. So the auctioneer's up at the podium, and I've got my father with me, and there's tons of people. This is one of the biggest auctions in the country. So there's lots of lanes, like 13 lanes of cars. There's auctioneers all babbling, and there's just incredible hype in the air. And these cars are constantly streaming through the lane, and people are bidding on them, and the auctioneer's bouncing around. So there's this thing called a ringer. Have you heard of a ringer?
No.
A ringer is when you plant somebody in the audience that's actually with you, and their whole purpose in life is to get the bid of the car up. Because sometimes if there aren't enough bidders on a car, it'll die prematurely. Even though the car's worth more, if there's only like one other person out there interested and there's nobody bidding against them, then it's going to die prematurely. So my father, who had never done this before, and I had never done that before, but I knew the pros do it all the time. They may have 2 or 3 ringers out there. So I says, so this is the deal. Well, you're going to keep bidding until we get to the highest bid, and then I'm going to have you just go this with your nose. I said I'm going to go like this with my nose, and that's your cue to stop bidding, okay? And we'll let the other guy buy the car if that's the way it goes. So he said, all right, we had it all figured out. I get up on the podium with the auctioneer, and the auctioneer starts this process. And this was like an $800 car. It was a Yugo back. I don't know if anybody remembers a Yugo, but they were a real bomb. And so in Yugo, the Yugo's going for, I only wanted $800 for it. They started off at $500, it's at $600, it's at $700, it's at $800. And this is one other person and my father going back and forth. And Dad would go like that, and the other guy would go like that, and they'd give their little nods. And they get this thing in the auction business. They don't really go like that. They just kind of wink or do some little tweak or something like that so that nobody knows who it is that's bidding on the car. But the auctioneer knows who it is. And it got past my $800, so I go like this, and my father doesn't notice, and he gets caught up in the hype, and all the screaming, and all the auction, and so they're going back and forth, and it's $900, and $1,100, and $1,200, and it went to $1,400. I couldn't believe it, and I was doing all kinds of stuff with my nose, trying to get my father to shut down, and he was just totally disconnected. And then finally the auctioneer goes, sold, and he points to my father. And I'm like, what do I do with that? And my dad finally realizes what happens, gets caught in shock in the middle of it all, and he realized that he's supposed to pay $1,600 for this car, and is directed to go up to the cashier over here. And instead, he bolts through the crowd, runs away. And so then security's called, and they're chasing after my father.
Oh, no.
And I leaned over and I told the auctioneer, I says, I got to tell you something. I said, that's my dad. And you know what? I'm not wearing my microphone.
Oh, well, hopefully they can hear you.
Oh, I speak loud enough where they can probably hear me.
Yeah, you're probably fine.
I says, that's my dad. And he says, oh, why didn't you tell me? I would have worked it so he wouldn't have bought the car. I says, oh, you're in on this too? He says, oh, yeah, we do it all the time. I said, oh, beautiful. And so I've since learned out you pay the auctioneer to do that. The auctioneer will do that, and he'll purposely, in his fast talk, make sure that the dad doesn't end up buying the car, right? He'll work that so that it always looks like the other guy's the high bidder. And even if the dad was, they don't see each other sometimes. And then at the end, you give the auctioneer a tip for doing what he did. So it's just corrupt from the ground up.
Wow.
And, anyway, 3 hours later, my dad came back into the auction when the heat calmed down, and I told him, we laugh about that one, talk about it forever. So that's got nothing to do with computers or technology even. That's a total random offshoot.
I mean, eBay Ukraine Hub, you can do bids on eBay, but that's about the closest tie-in we can do. And welcome back, by the way.
Yeah, welcome back. Yugo is from Yugoslavia, absolutely. Yeah, remember them well. So, let's talk about technology. What do you get this morning?
Yeah, well, I was going to ask you a question, actually. One that I get from a lot of customers, but is fiber internet faster than other internet?
Well, technically, they both just sit there, and neither one of them are very fast. But if you put data through them, the data inside is, yes, much faster in a fiber connection than it is through a cable connection or through a DSL connection,
right,
or through a piece of string through two cans. But as you know, I know this is a loaded question, they are only as fast as the spigot at the end lets it out. Mm-hmm. So if you've got a hose and you've got it's wide open and there's no restrictor on the outside, you're going to turn the valve on the other end, you're going to get free flow hose, and whatever it's got you'll get. But if you put a spigot on the end and you dial it back to where it's just a spray, that's all you're going to get.
Yep.
And the same thing applies to the fiber and to the cable. So if you guys are paying for fiber and you're paying for cable, or whatever you're paying for, it really all gets down to megabytes per second, Mbps. And so check with your provider, say how many Mbps am I getting for how much money? That's it. It's like it's no different than walking into a store and saying how much steak am I getting? How much is steak per pound? You've got to have a way to quantify it. In the case of the steak, it's going to be in the weight of that product. In the case of the fiber or the internet speed or the cable, whoever it is, that pound is going to be the Mbps. That's what you're buying.
Yeah. Well, then usually comparing the coaxial to your fiber, most of the time you do get more upload speed going the fiber route, I've noticed.
Yeah.
With, Ziply in the city isn't everywhere for people, but there's CenturyLink fiber, I've heard, and a lot of companies are trying to move towards fiber because it is
nationwide, worldwide. There's certainly in this country, there's a lot of companies. Yeah.
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 I've even seen Wave Cable, I think, do some fiber optic too.
Yeah. But the capability of speed is greater with fiber. So each one pushed to their highest extent of possible bandwidth, the fiber is going to kick cables.
Next question.
But at the same time, I've got service from both and the city and their fiber program, and actually the city fiber, the city's fiber as well, as well as through Ziply fiber, and both of those are different speeds. It just depends on what they throttle and what you're paying for. Yep. But yes, fiber has more potential,
as
eBay Ukraine says. But do check with your internet service provider. Know what you're paying for. How many megabytes per second am I getting, or am I supposed to be getting, and how much am I paying per month for that megabytes per second? And then you want to check, you want to verify that, you want to validate that. Go to a website. Just Google it online. Just type in the word speed test and run a speed test, and it'll tell you how many megabytes per second you're getting upload and download. Downloads for your all the TV programs you watch and enjoy, the things most people use it for, checking your email, that kind of stuff. Uploading is for the kind of stuff we're doing right now, for videos, for Zoom meetings. If you're doing those types of Zoom meetings and whatnot, and you're having problems, then that may be tied into it. Gaming, I imagine there's a lot of upload tied into gaming. Yep. Because you're pushing data out to the central server, and so you want to make sure you're getting what you pay for in both cases. For sure. And then also, just to clarify, just watching and consuming videos is download, but if you're live streaming or if you're uploading a video you created to YouTube or any other platform, the key term there is upload. You'll see that phrase used a lot on all sorts of cloud platforms as well. So that's what uses your upload statistics, if you'll say, right, on that point. Makes sense, yep. And you need to switch from dial-up. Well, yeah, eBay, I'm not sure if that's a joke or if that's real, but if you have dial-up and you have an opportunity to switch, you certainly should. Yes. Most dial-up companies have switched to DSL on their same phone lines. And they have different mediums. You know, DSL travels over the telephone lines. I forget what DSL stands for. It's a long name. And I'll look it up. And yeah, she can look that one up. Well, we'll know in a moment. And coaxial cable is the thing that started, I guess, about 30 years ago. They started digging up everybody's yards all across the country and laying down coaxial cable. Nobody thought that would actually ever happen, but it did. And it is? Digital subscriber line. A digital subscriber line. Okay, well, I thought it was more cryptic than that, but yeah, that's what it is. And or loop, apparently. Or loop. Okay, all right. I'm seeing both. Okay, so I think we pretty much covered that. What do you think? Yeah. So I guess another thing pertaining to internet is if suddenly everything you're doing, your TV or streaming Netflix, or if you're doing something on your computer and your whole internet service seems to just completely shut down, you can't access anything. What steps would you want to perform to see if it's an issue on your end or an issue with your internet service provider? And that's a question we get commonly. Most of the time, people call right away and they don't first try to just unplug their router and plug it back in to see if that helps. That's usually a pretty good first step. How many seconds would you say you give it when you do that test? I give it 5 minutes. You give it 5 minutes? Yeah, because some of these providers take a long time to get themselves back up again. Yeah. Douglas is he's on the bench today. We had so much business on the bench and in a lot of expectations today, so we want to make sure those customers' machines get ready. Yep. And so that was our situation this morning. Holiday rush. Yeah. So yeah, what the hell were we talking about? Yeah, so you said you plug it back in and give it about 5 minutes. Yeah. I give it 5 minutes just to make sure, because I have had Comcast, in our case, take a full 3 or 4 minutes before they get back to state, so some are faster. Yeah, so after doing the reboot on that, and another thing to point out is sometimes people also ask, how can you tell what the power cable is on my box here? And you usually will either have an Ethernet cable plugged into it. Some people just have one cable plugged in, and that is the power cable. So it just depends on your network setup. But most of the time I see them more towards the bottom of the box that you're working on, and then if you follow the cable, it's whichever one goes into your power outlet. That's the one you want to unplug, and we tend to unplug it from the base of the router itself rather than the wall, just so that there's no lingering power in the cord. Right. And leave that. Well, now I would leave that off. I don't know if I misunderstood your question. I would leave the power off from the device for about 60 seconds. Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. that was what I was asking. That was your question? Too. Okay, 60 seconds, that's 60 seconds. And then when I plug it in, I don't have any expectations for about 5 minutes. Exactly. So if things fail, don't worry about it. Try it 5 minutes later. So the 6-minute reboot in full. Right. And as far as how to test it, it's a difficult question. Is sometimes, okay, my internet is having problems. is it my internet service provider or is it my own infrastructure?
Yeah.
And that can be real difficult for a lot of people to troubleshoot. And if you're using your own router instead of the internet service provider's router, you've got a different responsibility. You can save money every month, $10 a month or whatever, to use your own router and modem and not the internet service providers. They charge you every month to rent theirs, and that's great. The big problem becomes when you do have an internet outage and you assume it's your internet service provider. You call them and they say, everything looks great from our end. We don't see any problems. And because it's your router, you can't really insist that it's got to do with them. They suggest to you that it's your own router, and now you've got to figure out how to play IT person and troubleshoot this problem, and that can be difficult to do.
Yeah.
So what would you do for your first, what would be your first line, your first move if you had your own router? Yep. And they said it wasn't them?
So if they said it wasn't them and you had already verified too on their website, I think most of the time you can look up if there's any outages
verifying on their
in
website.
the area.
You can do that. Yeah.
And you can do that on most of the time if your internet's down. You won't be able to look it up with your computer, but if you have a cellular connection, you can use your cell phone to look up your internet service provider and see if there's any outages in the area. Most of the time, if there is something, I've even seen some companies post a Twitter update and that's it. So it just depends on whatever company you're working with. But from there, it's a matter of waiting until that outage passes. There's nothing you can really do if there's an outage in your area other than waiting for the internet service provider to restore that.
Sure.
And some of them also give you notice, but I've seen in some cases they don't send an email or text notifying people that that's why the internet is down. So just be mindful of checking that as probably your second step after trying to reboot your router to see if that helps. And then going from there, I don't know if plugging in a laptop and doing all the stuff that we do here at the shop would be something worth covering, just because it is a lot.
Well, I think the number one thing that I would want to make clear is you've got multiple devices in multiple areas of your house. You need to forget about all of those.
Right.
Right? You need to get a device, whether it's your laptop or a desktop, I don't care which. And that may be harder if it's a desktop and it's on the other side of your house, but you've got to find a way of testing the internet right behind your router. So you've got your router cable that might go to a switch, that might go to a million other things that can obfuscate where the problem lies. So you've got to start right at the source, a wire out of the router, directly into your laptop ideally, or your desktop if need be, and then see if you have internet there. If you don't have internet there, and you know that the computer itself is not the problem, right?
That's important.
Because you can have a computer that's got a problem, and if you've only got one computer in your house, then you
should take it somewhere and test it.
Yeah. Then you might want to try a Wi-Fi test. If in fact that router is the only thing producing Wi-Fi, you can try your phone, check the turn off your cellular on your cell phone, check your Wi-Fi, and see if that works on your phone. At least you'll know that that router is in fact working, and the problem's in your computer. Right. If you've ruled out Wi-Fi is broke, your computer that's attached directly to your router is broke, now you are down to the big question: is it your router/modem device, if they're all in one, which they usually are, or is it the internet service provider who's already told you it's not them? And there's really only one way that we've been able to troubleshoot that one.
Yeah.
You want to get into that, or you want me to get into that?
I mean, I'll let you take that one.
So you have the router itself. Any modem coming in from the internet by any internet service provider, they provide your house an IP address and a gateway, and the DNS numbers, which are typically going to be 8888 or 1111. But anyway, you have an IP address to that device, and you have something called a gateway to that device. And at the point where they say that it's not them, you would need, I'm trying to think, you don't have a router. It depends on the kind of wire that they have, but you basically take the direct feed before it even gets to your modem. Can I do that?
That's the tricky one, is it depends,
Am I doing it before I get to the router? In my case, I'm doing it right out of the wall.
Right from the modem,
No,
right?
no, it's beyond the modem.
Yeah.
It's got to be beyond the modem. So if your modem and router is built into one device, you can't really, well, you'd have to turn, here's what you'd have to do. You'd have to turn off DHCP in your router. That's what you'd have to do, because you want to get a feed directly from the modem and take the router out of the loop. So you'd have to turn off DHCP in the router itself, which is advanced user stuff. So at this point, you're probably going to be on the phone with people like us saying, hey, they're blaming, this is the problem. They're going to say, they're saying the internet works fine. It doesn't work fine, and I don't know where to go. So next thing you know, you've got a service person who would come to your home, would disable DHCP on your router to make sure that it doesn't give out IP addresses, and then you would manually set up your laptop in that Ethernet adapter for using the IP address that they assigned you and the gateway that they provided you and the DNS of 8888, and hit enter, and then you're bypassing the router and you're seeing whether or not you do have an internet connection directly from your internet service provider and their modem, and the router portion of the equation is taken out of the loop. But that is complicated for a lot of people. In cases like us, the other day we dealt with that. We have a modem that is just a modem and a router that's in advance of that. So we don't have to turn off DHCP in the router. We can just unplug it from the router, where it comes from the modem to the router, and plug that into the laptop, and again set the laptop's adapter up to where it has its own, where it has the internet service provider's IP address, gateway, and DNS, which you can Google those things or look on AI. It's beyond the scope of the podcast to get into that kind of detail, but that information is out there on how to do basically what we're talking about here. And that will still, if they own the modem, this is the thing, if they own the modem, they have to respond to this at that point. If you say you have no internet after doing that and they own the modem, they're on the hook. They've got to send somebody, and they know they have to send somebody because they know you've gone the extra mile. But if it's your modem, you're still screwed because you still don't know that the modem isn't part of the problem. You literally have to replace your modem in order to solve the problem with a different modem to find out if you had the same problem.
Right.
And for that reason, I recommend that most people that have residential service, unless you're prepared to deal with this when it comes up, pay the $10 a month, rent their device. You'll always have the latest and greatest. You can always yell at them and force them to respond no matter what because it's their equipment. So.
Yeah. There is definitely a benefit to that, and that way you don't have to go through all of those steps if it does come up.
Yeah, if you're not savvy enough to jump in and test that, whose fault is it anyway, from that level, then you may be better off to rent it.
Oh.
All right.
That was pretty good. Well, let's see here. Well, I guess I have a question for you. Say you were working on your laptop with your coffee right there, and you accidentally bumped it and it spilled all over your keyboard. What would be the first thing you do?
Well, first of all, I'd like to mention that has happened to me twice in my life.
Oh, no.
The first time it wasn't my fault because I didn't know any better, right? The second time it was all on me because I've seen that movie before. And in neither case did I have the knowledge of how to respond quickly enough at that stage of my life. And in both cases, it cost me my laptops. I've since learned, as she certainly has learned. I don't know, have you done that personally?
Luckily not.
Okay.
I've done it to, I think, like an external keyboard. So.
Right. Now this used to be, external keyboard's no problem, by the way. If you've got an external keyboard, and I don't care if you're using a laptop or not. If you're using an external keyboard and you pour a glass of your favorite wine, coffee, or whatever on top of that, I don't care how sticky a substance it is, it won't affect your laptop at all.
Yep.
Just kill your keyboard. Take it out, buy another $30 keyboard, problem's over.
Yep.
So there's a lot to be said for that. Now, having said what she said, if I pour water, spill water on the device, the first thing you should do, if you have the opportunity, you should do two things in exactly this order. Hold your power button down for 5 seconds to totally shut off your machine and discharge any electricity to it. Just pressing the power button and waiting for it to shut down is not the move, because that'll take you too long, and once those circuits start to connect with the liquid, you've got a problem.
Yep.
So you want to get it off as fast as possible. Now, the only way you can get it off faster than that is if you happen to have a laptop that has a battery that's easily accessible. And nowadays, that's probably a 50-50 or a 60-40 or something like that.
Very low.
In the old days, it was 100%. You could get the battery by just flipping a switch somewhere and drop that battery out of there. So if you know the battery is able to be disconnected, go for that first, pop it out. If you're not sure, go for the power button, hold it in for 5 seconds. Once it's discharged, and by the way, make sure your plug is unplugged from the wall. I should say that. I guess that's the first move. Unplug from the wall.
Unplug it.
Hold your power button in for 5 seconds to turn it off and discharge, and then immediately flip it off. Flip it off. Yeah, flip it. Give it the finger.
I don't think that'll help too much, but you know, you can include that in the
Psychologically, I think that has an impact, and I'm sure the laptop will appreciate it. Flip it over, and because that liquid that's in there, at least it'll be heading towards the keyboard and not heading towards the inside of the machine. And while it's flipped over, look at where is the possibility of getting to that, getting to that battery. And by the way, when you flip it over, you should open the screen up so that if you do have liquid coming out of there, it's not going into the screen and off to the sides underneath the bezel on the screen. So there's a little bit of trickery there. But you just want to get it flipped over so you can look at that and see if there's any screws to take off, or see if there's just a button in the battery to pop out, and that will at least buy you time. If you've got liquid that has seeped into dangerous places, and you're going to be tempted. At this point after 20 minutes has gone by, nobody died. I may have survived that. Let's plug the battery back in, hit the power button, see if we have life. Don't do it. I would recommend that. Personally, that happened to me right now, it would be going in the oven.
Don't suggest that again. People are going to do it.
It would be going in the oven. Now, I am not responsible for your laptop if you choose to do this.
Goodness.
Now, if you can take it outside, if it's hot, if in your environment, if the sun's out, it's a warm environment. But if it's a moist, like Washington State, and you just put it somewhere, it's probably going to keep that liquid in there for many days. And there are the people that use the rice treatment. You familiar with that?
Yes.
You buy satchels of rice because it's the same kind of thing they use in salt containers.
Right.
They put it in salt containers to get rid of the moisture. You can put it in, get yourself plenty of rice, enough to fit your laptop in it, stick it in there. I don't know how long it takes. Google it, AI it. You'll get some answers to those questions, but that's a commonly used. And there is actually something out there that's superior to rice. They're some kind of a man-made material that's designed to just suck all the moisture.
I feel like that's probably better, because I have heard some people say the rice technique is not as good as a lot of people claim it to be, with all the starches. And
whenever you buy electronics online, you often find that little package of something in there, a little bag with some stuff. Those pellets can be bought in 5-pound bags. They're not cheap, but they'll be cheaper than a laptop, and you can stick it in there and wait it out. I myself, I'm patient in many ways in my life, but when it comes to getting my electronics back and using it again, maybe not quite as patient. But if I could take the hard drive out first, maybe that would be a good idea.
Yeah.
And put it off to the side, and then cook it in the oven for, I don't know, I'd probably set it at 150 degrees. Florida's 100 degrees half the time. Arizona's 110, 120. So that's not an unusual thing, and you have to make your own decision there, but high enough to where liquid would evaporate naturally, but you wouldn't be cooking your electronics or melting your plastics.
And I guess another thing is if you have time to just let it sit, my recommendation would be once you get the battery out, hard drive, whatever you want to take out of the system, you can have your laptop opened up so that you got it on the screen so you can see the screen, it's flipped over, and then the keyboard is facing kind of downwards so that any liquid will hopefully slowly drain out. And you're going to want to put a layer of paper towels over the screen to help prevent it. If liquid does come out, you don't want it to be sitting on your screen for a long period of time.
Okay, yeah.
That's what we do here for most spill cases, but also most spill cases, we ask the customer, when did this happen? And they say a week ago, a month ago. So that doesn't give us very much time, and most times too, they've already tried to turn it on with no luck.
Right.
So at that point, if you try to turn it on before it's time, or before you've let it fully dry out, or give it a couple days, or however you want to go about it, it's a big risk, because once it fries something, most of the time, if it's the motherboard, you're done.
Right. If there's anybody watching this, I see we've got a lot of people chiming in from YouTube, and we have eBay Ukraine Hub has, okay, it looks like he spilled a beer on his laptop, and something about it. Let's see, put rice in a rice cooker, put in rice. So did you do any of these things? Were you successful? I guess that becomes my question. I know you're saying it's happened with your beer and you put it in rice, but I don't have an income.
Well, I don't know if he was necessarily putting it in rice. I think he was replying to what we were saying earlier.
Oh, yeah. And we've told a story once before, and I won't get into a long version of it, but I did have this conversation with somebody. It wasn't about water, but her computer was freezing, and as a solution to her computer freezing, I jokingly said put it in the oven, set it to 250 degrees, which she did, and months later she brought her computer into the shop and it was melted. The whole bottom of the machine was melted, and I asked her, what the heck happened to your laptop? And she said, well, you told me when it was freezing to put it in the oven at 250 degrees. It's like, oh, I was just kidding. And she said, well, it worked. And she'd been using her computer fine ever since then. So that's another story.
The well it worked is the real kicker for that whole story.
And it did, man. Because I'd seen that computer many times since then. And the whole bottom was just warped from being on the grate at 250 degrees. And it survived it.
I wish I could have seen that. It would be hard not to laugh.
It's a classic. I should have tried to buy it off her just to go with the story to have in perpetuity.
Yeah. Do you know how long she used it for?
A long time. I know that. She'd had that computer for years. I know that.
Oh.
So it stood the test of time.
Still wouldn't recommend it.
Yeah. It was a Toshiba. I remember that.
It was a Nokia of laptops, apparently.
Yeah. Oh, Nokia survivors?
Yeah.
Okay.
Have you heard about how much of a tank those phones were?
No.
It was a big joke. The Nokia phones were built like a brick, so people could throw it or do whatever they wanted, and it would still be working.
Oh, no, never knew about that one. I did have a Nokia flip phone back in the day, but
yeah.
Yeah.
eBay Ukraine Hub says, did she specify the temperature? I will try this with mine. Yeah, I mean, at this point with the rice and everything else, you could make a laptop casserole, I suppose.
Yeah. Hers. I instructed her to use 250 degrees to stop her computer from freezing, and that was above any temperature, any laptop's temperature. I mean, it will cause the plastic to melt, as we learned.
You don't want to risk the battery exploding in your oven either. Don't.
It was a joke.
Don't do it.
I think 150 is probably the most you could probably get away with. But that's a test in and of itself.
Yeah, I don't know if I would have the guts to do that.
Yeah. I mean, we should, if we don't have an oven at the store, that's the problem. It would be really a good experiment. If anybody else out there wants to try this, to take a laptop that's turned off, right? Mm-hmm. That no power to it, battery even removed.
Yeah, that would be the big recommendation. Don't put the battery in.
And take it and drop it in a bucket of water. Get it thoroughly saturated. Mm-hmm. It's just water. Shouldn't hurt anything in that form. And then take it out and stick it in the oven and see what temperature it is, how long it takes. before all the water's gone and you can start that laptop up. That would be a very interesting
That'd be a funny experiment.
test, yeah.
Maybe do an older laptop, just in case.
Okay, we have from the Profanator, or the Profanator, one or the other. Is there any reason to replace Windows 11 with any of the Linux distros for work purposes, data analysis? Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I mean, if you want better security and things like that, Linux is less in your face about pop-ups and advertisements and privacy violations and whatever else it's doing in the background.
I think let's talk about why would you not do it would be a better question.
Yeah, that's a good.
And the only reason you would not do it is if you had a Windows-specific program that didn't run in the Linux environment that you relied upon, that you had to use. There's a zillion programs that Linux offers that are not available on Linux or on Windows. So it goes both ways. So if it does all the things you need it to do now and in the future, so far as you can tell, then Linux is, a better choice. Yeah. Less pop-ups, free upgrades, free software, more stable, bulletproof in the way to go. So that's my feeling.
And the cool thing about Linux too, at least with Ubuntu, if you go down that route, I'm sure your other distributions also offer this feature. But if you make a USB bootable, you can actually plug it into any computer and click on Try Ubuntu without installing it, just to see how it works with your environment. And then whenever you're done with it, anything or any files you saved on it go away. But it's something that you can test just to see if how it works for your particular use case.
Yeah, so we're big fans of Linux here at the store. We use it on a lot of computers.
Yeah.
And I use it every day. My main computer is a Windows computer because the multimedia environment that you're looking at right now, I'm using a product called ATEM, which is by Blackmagic, and they support Windows. That's their thing. I think they have Apple supported as well, but they don't support Linux. So there are going to be those types of realities, but most folks are, I'd say the majority of users in this country could be using Linux and they would be better served. They just don't know it.
Yeah. Well, especially for a lot of people that just want to do browsing or email or document writing, it's a lot more private and secure to go that route. And then it comes built in, I think, most of the time with Firefox as a browser too, so they're even stepping further away from all the privacy junk.
Yep. And you got LibreOffice and Google Office, and you get so many alternatives to what used to be required in Windows.
Yeah.
Lots of photo programs, lots of graphics programs are available in Linux now. So it's just the barriers are few. Then people that are into architecture design, you might find limitations there. The gaming world, you might be going to find some limits there.
I've heard SteamOS is potentially coming out to be able to download on a bunch of different platforms now instead of just their proprietary Steam Deck, which would be pretty cool. So depending, the gaming side of Linux could be expanded here pretty soon, if not already. I have heard some advances in that regard.
I know Douglas seems to think, and probably a lot of you people watching would agree, that if the gaming industry were to outright embrace Linux completely, then the majority of those gamers would move to Linux, and that it would change the landscape of technology for a wide swath of people.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say it's a pretty good chance if it was really well built and sturdy. There's so many different things now in gaming where people run into problems with their graphics or whatever else just because they have software running in the background that causes issues, or if they could make it more stable by going to Linux somehow, I feel like a lot of people would jump to it.
Yep. So you got any good stories?
Well, it is 10:57.
Oh, dang it. All right, well.
We'll have to leave the laptop casserole recipe for next time.
Very good. Very good. Well, thank you very much for watching, and we appreciate it. Hope you learned a little bit in the process. We'll see you on Tuesday.
Yeah. We'll be here Tuesday around 10 a.m. PST, so feel free to jump on Facebook or YouTube and